Cool. Thanks for having me, ATypI. My name's Quinn, and today I'll be talking about two different type foundries and how you can use their stories and their features in order to shape how you design your next website. So that you know where I'm coming from, I do type marketing material for the industry. So basically my job is to get the fonts you create into the hands of designers, art directors, you name it. Basically, I get paid when you guys get paid. I think I probably get paid if you don't get paid too, but that's no, yeah, anyways. So yeah, two different type foundries, MCKL and TDF. They have very different sizes, very different client bases, and they're looking to appeal to a lot of different features. So I'll go through them quickly, and then you'll hear about the features they used. First is Mikkel. Mikkel's LA-based type foundry, done by Jeremy Mikkel. He's a single designer. They have a really superb client base. They do work for Etsy, Craft, a lot of big name clients, but they never had their own e-commerce site. They only sold through retailers. So part of the reason why we started building a new site was obviously to have direct-to-user sales. This was a previous version that we did. We further developed the branding for the site, made a UI all based off their current design. We put a lot of the focus on the retail aspect of his library, not showing logos and custom work nearly as much. And then, and we made a pretty significant e-commerce system that was based around making relationships off type families and not off single products or packages, so that you could have more meaningful typeface sales. After some feedback, we went on to our second beta, which we released a while ago. And we're proud to say that next week we'll be actually launching this site. It was rebranded. There were some more dramatic changes to the brand, including gradients, larger, more consumable type, stuff like that. We also reintroduced logos and custom work because they were an important element of their research and day-to-day Foundry life. So we reintroduced those into the nav bar. So we're pretty happy with that. And I hope you guys keep your eyes out and you'll see that on live next week. These were a few of the new branding mock-ups that we did. This is the custom typeface page, so that we treat custom typefaces a bit more directly. They're not just like case studies or quick examples, but they're more featured elements of the entire Foundry. The next site I'll be speaking about is the Designer Foundry. They are a newer Foundry, retail Foundry. This was their old site, or current site. They have a huge collection of typefaces from varying designers at varying experience levels. So part of the things that we were worried about when we were doing the design for the new one was allowing for those different styles to speak for themselves, basically not to drown them out. This is one of the layouts we did at the early stage that did not do that. So we had to be less opinionated. The way we did that was having a pretty simplistic UI. I mean, there's obviously a lot of features, but it's white and it's black. It's not very stylized. And then having elements that you could overlay to integrate with that and bring out some more TDF-inspired design choices. This would be like a scratch card one. You could like scratch it and you'd reveal the type. Another element that we thought was super important was what I've been calling the catalog pages. So because there are so many typefaces, it had to be important in order to quickly go through them, find something you're interested in, and then start playing with it immediately. So with the catalog page, it's very flexible, and there's a lot of different features, but it's still black and white, and each typeface has a space for its own. We also wanted to introduce some fun textual elements into the site. A strong branding device that they use in the Designer Foundry is these bold phrases. And this is just one of the ideas that we had, but it's basically a 12-word story, and every time you come to the site, it'll randomly choose a single word in that 12-word story, and you'll be able to change it. And then you hit submit, and the next person who comes to the site sees a new one, and it evolves, and we record it and maybe eventually do something pretty cool with it. So now you know these two different foundries. I want to talk about features. Because who doesn't love features? I really like features. Oh, there's supposed to be sound. Oh, well. So, tracking font sales. If you are a retail foundry, at the end of the month, one of the big hassles you have to go through is paying your contributors. So one of the features one of the features we were introducing is auto payments for retailers, something that was customizable, and something that they could track and log in and see on their own. Another element was the typeface overview or the catalog pages. If you're a smaller foundry with a more condensed library, like MCL is, you can see all those typefaces on one page. So you can kind of have something fun to play with that's more opinionated when it comes to your branding. But like I was mentioning earlier, if you have a larger collection with many different range and styles, something a little bit more reserved is ideal. Next is adding font files. Obviously, in the Foundry site, you need to add your font files, whether it's for font delivery or display on the site itself. This is an example of a highly customizable one. So for example, let's say your WAF2s are edited specifically depending on the file type. You can actually create those files. Another approach would be a generative approach, where you basically add your TTFs, and the Foundry agrees on the ideal generative method, and then you just add your TTFs in, and it outputs the rest. That helps, hopefully, to remove some human error, and also just make maintenance more manageable. Account creation. So, not to talk about guest checkout at this stage, but there's a few different approaches that we used when deciding on account creation. The first of which is the obvious: you put in your email and your password. We did something a little bit interesting in this approach, in that if you didn't have an account and you put in an email and a password, and the email hadn't been taken already, it would just generate an account for you with that password, hopefully simplifying the process a little bit. And then another feature that everyone should just consider, if not implement, is social login. It's much easier. I kind of think it's a no-brainer. Guest checkout. A lot of foundries want guest checkout. It makes a lot of sense. For a lot of the features that we were concerned with, having hosted files that you could refresh and you could see the metadata for was an important part in order to achieve those features. So we opted in to not have guest checkout. But there's also ways that you could simulate guest checkout. So for example, you don't sign in and it would generate a temporary account for you, or maybe just an anonymized account. And then at a later date, if you'd like to, you could retrieve the information of that, or immediately after purchase, you could add in the data for that. So I think there's an opportunity there. It just needs to be solidified a little bit more. Next is serving font files pre-purchase. So that would be on the client side. Those would be the files that you actually see on the website. And there's a few things that I thought were important. The first of which is, I wish I had that laser pointer. The first of which is in source, everything is base64 encoded, makes it a little bit more difficult to access. Next of which, you obfuscate the files so that all the metadata is the same, which makes it a lot more difficult to use on a desktop. And then another element that is relatively new is the font display swap feature. That changes how fonts are loaded in the browser itself, so that there isn't that ugly white flash right before they're loaded. I would look into it a little bit more. I think it's pretty cool. So we bundled it with everything. For serving font files post-purchase, I'm super interested in a generative, highly customized product you receive. There's so much effort that goes into the creation of typefaces. I think it's sometimes a shame when the product you buy, the effort doesn't go nearly as much into how that's delivered to you. In this example, they purchased app, desktop, and web license. If you were to just purchase like an app license, for example, you'd only get the app EULA, so that you're not messing around with a EULA that doesn't even concern you. The more interesting element of an approach like this would be if you were to buy a web license, for example, you could have HTML or CSS pages generated for you. You could have stylus. If you are a front-end developer and use stylus, it could be generated for you. And you can make those opinionated style sheets. So for example, this is a stylus sheet, and this font family, Fort, fits into the 1 to 900 range. So that means that instead of having every file, or every font file defined singly, you can actually organize them and generate them so that they are 100, 200, 300 weights, etc. And then, of course, I've also implemented the font display feature because it's awesome. Please check it out. Next is multi-typeface relationships. So this is a lot more to do with the way we've structured our cart. The way the cart works is you're not just buying single items, they all have relationships. So for example, if you were to buy a light style and then a light italic, the website should know that you've purchased a pair and give you a discount automatically. And then that applies up to like collections. So for example, you want the whole Shift family. If you selected all the styles, you would expect it to give you the discount automatically. But what if you had a more complex situation, like the one I'm trying to show here is editorial series, which is probably not going to be offered, called that, but it's basically 4 styles of this type family and 4 styles of another one that's curated to target a specific demographic. And you should be able to select that, and the site should be able to know that that's still part of the larger ecosystem. Next is font-specific discount tracking. So some of you might be familiar with feedback on the web. So like, for example, hovering over buttons. it's nice in order to have that button change so that you know you're actually hovering over something. In this example, it would also be nice to know that if you were to click something, you're going to get a discount on it. It's an incentive to actually go that extra distance and make that additional purchase. So one of the features that we like is showing what that discount is before you click it. Next is searching. To make this simple, smart searching is evolving all the time, adding in metadata, searching through titles, searching by author. You don't see it enough on TypeFoundry websites, and at least not in a sophisticated and idiot-proof approach. And we would like to implement that, and I'd like to encourage all of you to also implement more holistic search. Next, hosted files versus delivered files. So in the work that we've been doing, we're hosting all of our files. And that allows us to automatically update them if there is like a new update of the font. It allows us to control licensee issues. Let's say that there's support issues. We can immediately stick more files in, and they can go to the same ticket and re-download it. So I'd like to encourage more people to do that, and especially if you're going to do web hosting. I mean, that would be the logical next step. And I assume that maybe one day a lot of type foundries will be doing that. License tracking, there's so many features I can get into. I don't have time to get into them. I think I'm already over. But I'm around. If you want to talk more about it, please do. I'd like to thank Mikkel Type. I'd like to thank the Designers Foundry. Special thanks to Zepong. He did the awesome branding on the Mikkel Type site. And I'm Quinn. Thank you.